Doesn't know, and I do know Jafar, the first speaker, so here I am again. We will have a session still on the general topic of raw materials, but looking also at issues related to their procurement, the sustainable procedures in terms of identification and logistics related to the use of raw materials. And we will have two speakers this morning. One looking at prehistoric behavior and one looking at, I was about to say post-historic behavior. Will be introduced by Professor Pena Jureis in a while. The first speaker is Professor Jafar Ben Nasr. He's a professor at the University of Kairouan in Tunisia and currently visiting lecturer at the Polytechnic Institute of Tomar through the consortium Amigo that has been funded by the European Commission. Jafar is not the first time that you are here in Mação. We know each other for a certain number of years. He is a leading expert in rock art and prehistoric studies in Northern Africa and particularly in Tunisia, but with a wider understanding of these procedures, of these processes. And he has been acted not only as a lecturer, but also taking responsibilities as head of department and others in his university. And also with a strong networking activity at an international scale. Jafar, thank you very much for being with us. Jafar will speak in French.
Yes.
For the sake of language diversity, we accept all languages except Portuguese. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening. Good afternoon. I am so glad to be with you today. Before starting, I want to thank my friend Luigi Stobeck, who gave me the opportunity to participate to this meeting of Geosciences Center as a keynote speaker. The main idea was to propose a presentation in rock art, which is my principal scientific research interest, but to be more in line with the subject of this conference, I choose the theme of the role of cultural heritage in promoting sustainable local development in low density territory context, taken as a case study Jebel Ouslet, a semi-arid mountain landscape of central Tunisia. This topic is also relevant for several projects at IPT, namely the Highland project and the UNESCO Bridge project on low density territory, focused on the role of humanities in contemporary society. So I will focus on the importance of tangible and intangible heritage in the sustainable development of contemporary mountain society. In this perspective, the Jebel Ouslet offered a very interesting case study. Sorry for my bad English, so I apologize for continuing my presentation in French. Donc aujourd'hui, je présente cet exposé sur l'importance du patrimoine culturel, matériel et immatériel dans l'avenir des montagnes, en prenant comme exemple la montagne de Jebel Ouslet, une montagne donc, de la Tunisie centrale. Et en fait, il ne s'agit pas d'un exposé purement scientifique, c'est plutôt une invitation au voyage, une invitation à découvrir cette montagne et de partager avec vous cette expérience dont l'objectif surtout de chercher des connexions scientifiques et peut-être de nouer des partenariats futurs. Et je crois que c'est l'un des principaux objectifs de cette conférence. Sur le plan géographique, donc, le Jebel Ouslet, la montagne de Ouslet, c'est une moyenne montagne de la Tunisie centrale, donc à moyenne altitude qui culmine à 900 mètres et qui fait partie de la chaîne de la dorsale tunisienne qui donc, se connecte à la chaîne atlantique et qui se prolonge en Algérie puis au Maroc. Cette montagne est fort connue en Tunisie, surtout par un événement historique très important. C'est donc cette montagne, elle a connu le premier diaspora de l'histoire moderne de la Tunisie, parce qu'elle a été complètement vidée de sa population en 1762 par une décision donc, du pouvoir central à Tunis. À l'époque, les beys de Tunis qui ont décidé de vider cette montagne complètement de sa population, parce que cette montagne, durant son histoire, elle a abrité une population berbère qui était toujours en opposition au pouvoir central, donc toujours en rébellion, et le bey a décidé de vider cette montagne de sa population en 1762. Donc depuis cette date, cette montagne est restée vide de sa population, et cette politique a été renforcée par la suite après l'indépendance en 1956. Le pouvoir, donc le jeune pouvoir de la Tunisie indépendante a décidé de vider toutes les montagnes de leur population. Donc, Ouslet est déjà vide et ils ont pratiqué cette politique surtout pour les berbères du sud de la Tunisie. Mais cette montagne se présente vraiment comme un musée à ciel ouvert. Donc, elle renferme un important potentiel naturel et surtout archéologique. Elle abrite des formations donc, géologiques très exceptionnelles. C'est un site qui présente donc, un grand intérêt en matière de nature. C'est un site qui, donc ici, je vous laisse admirer quelques paysages de cette montagne. Donc ces abris contiennent surtout des peintures et des gravures rupestres. Nous y revenons sur la thématique de l'art rupestre. J'aurai surtout l'occasion de développer cette thématique dans les prochains jours avec les étudiants de master. Cette montagne est également une niche écologique pour la faune et pour la flore. Déjà, la montagne de Ouslet contient ou abrite encore la plus ancienne, parmi les plus anciennes variétés d'oliviers en Afrique du Nord. Et on pense que cette variété qui s'appelle en arabe le lgim ousleti, elle peut remonter facilement donc, à l'époque néolithique. Elle contient aussi pas mal de plantes médicinales, partiellement exploitées par une population résiduelle. En fait, cette population n'habite pas la montagne, mais elle habite au pied de la montagne, mais exploite quelques ressources saisonnières de la montagne. Plusieurs espèces aussi niches protégées et recensées par l'International Union for Conservation of Nature. Donc ces espèces nichent encore à Jbel Ouslet. Jbel Ouslet abrite aussi les restes d'une faune résiduelle menacée d'extinction. Jbel Ouslet donc se présente aujourd'hui comme un contexte de basse densité territoriale. Je rappelle que donc, cette montagne a été vidée complètement de sa population depuis le XVIIIe siècle et très peu de personnes donc, fréquentent cette montagne actuellement pour exploiter quelques ressources, surtout pour donc, l'apiculture, le pastoralisme et la distillation du romarin. Passons maintenant donc au patrimoine matériel. Là, Jbel Ouslet se distingue surtout par ses sites d'art rupestre. Cette montagne, c'est le principal foyer
est le principal centre d'art rupestre en Tunisie. Sa position centrale a fait qu'elle a donc profité des influences sahariennes venues du sud et des influences occidentales plutôt venues de l'Atlas saharien algérien et marocain. Et Jebel Ouslet donc contient un ensemble très riche de peintures et de gravures. Ces peintures et gravures s'échelonnent sur une chronologie longue qui va du 6e millénaire BC jusqu'au pratiquement l'époque moderne. Et à Jebel Ouslet aussi, nous avons les plus anciennes attestations d'écriture téfinare, libico-berbère en Tunisie. Cette écriture et le parler déjà berbère a continué, donc, comme l'attestent les sources historiques, jusqu'au XVIIIe siècle. Ici, donc, l'ensemble des gravures qui représentent une faune sauvage. Et donc, j'aurai l'occasion de revenir surtout avec les étudiants de master sur ces manifestations artistiques, du point de vue thématique et surtout chronologique. Et Jebel Ouslet donc abrite les plus anciennes gravures attestées jusqu'à maintenant en Tunisie et qui remontent en chronologie relative au 16e millénaire. Donc cette tradition rupestre, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, s'est prolongée jusqu'aux époques, donc jusqu'à la protohistoire, l'époque libico-berbère et jusqu'à l'époque historique. Donc, personnellement, j'ai travaillé sur cette montagne pour mon PhD, puis dans mon postdoc, et j'ai recensé au moins une trentaine de sites qui se répartissent entre sites d'art rupestre et sites d'habitat. Il y a un type d'habitat très connu en Afrique du Nord. La toponymie donc, locale l'appelle Ramadia, c'est du remède au centre, sorte de shell middens. Donc c'est un amas de pierres brûlées, de cendres, d'industrie lithique, de la faune. Donc ce type d'habitat est caractéristique de l'épaléolithique donc jusqu'au néolithique. Et au Jebel Ouslet, j'ai inventorié une vingtaine de sites d'habitat. Certains sites sont en rapport avec des abris surtout gravés, avec des gravures. Outre la préhistoire, donc de point de vue vestige archéologique, le Jebel Ouslet aussi donc, contient un patrimoine très riche et très intéressant en ruines romaines et byzantines, surtout des fortins. Si nous avons les traces des restes de pressoirs de différents types, principalement romains et peut-être même puniques. Moi, je dirais qu'il y en a d'autres types plus anciens qui peuvent remonter jusqu'à la protohistoire. Vous avez ici, donc, c'est dans la roche. Hein. Ici, il manque la meule pour donc, écraser les olives. Vous avez cette photo qui donc, représente en quelque sorte le procédé utilisé jusqu'à maintenant dans quelques régions en Tunisie. Le Jebel Ouslet contient aussi les ruines d'au moins une centaine de villages médiévaux qui remontent à l'époque médiévale. C'est le recensement de 1959 et de nouveaux travaux ont montré que ce nombre peut être donc, plus qu'une centaine. Et la population de Jebel Ouslet lors de son lors du diaspora a été estimée à entre 30 et 45 000 habitants. Donc à l'époque, cette montagne, c'est le deuxième foyer de population, la deuxième concentration après la capitale Tunis. Déjà, donc toute la population a été parsemé sur l'ensemble de la Tunisie, on peut suivre donc les traces de ces habitants à travers leurs noms très caractéristiques. Donc ces villages sont des villages en ruine. Beaucoup d'entre eux, pour ne pas dire la majorité, sont des villages perchés et agglomérés dans des conditions défensives. Beaucoup d'entre eux sont installés sur des éperons de falaise, une crête étroite, un piton détaché. Presque tous sont ainsi juchés au-dessus des bourrelets de calcaire. Ici, donc, l'un des plus anciens villages de cette montagne. Et d'après quelques études que j'ai faites avec mon collègue Riyad Lamrabat, on pense sérieusement que c'est le noyau le plus ancien de peuplement de ce massif et qui peut remonter jusqu'à la protohistoire, qui a été par la suite réutilisé pendant l'époque historique. Autre montagne berbère, c'est la montagne des Ardennes. Donc vous voyez comment ces villages se détachent et qui suivent la ligne de crête. Et ce type d'habitat, c'est caractéristique des populations berbères. Et nous pouvons l'observer dans plusieurs montagnes donc, du Maghreb et de la Tunisie, surtout au sud du pays. Autre diapo qui montre les techniques de construction et l'utilisation de la technique de la pierre sèche. Bon, il existait donc avant un chaînage en bois et la toiture était en bois, mais le bois a disparu parce qu'elle est utilisée comme combustible. Autre, voilà, c'est un exemple d'une mosquée perchée. Vraiment, ce que je vous montre ne représente pas même les 10% de ce qui existe dans cette montagne. C'est vraiment un aperçu très rapide de la richesse archéologique et patrimoniale de cette montagne. Donc, d'autres mosquées. Ici, juste une idée sur la matière première, qui est le calcaire, elle est extraite sur place. Donc, les gradins du calcaire s'individualisent et leur exploitation est relativement facile. Un autre type de construction qui exploite donc les gradins calcaires. Donc c'est toujours la même technique, l'utilisation de la pierre sèche. Ici, l'un des villages qui continue quand même à être exploité saisonnièrement. Donc, autre type d'habitat, ce sont des abris sur roche aménagés en habitation. Et vous pouvez regarder ici, il y a une habitation en étage. Il y a une répartition donc, de l'espace domestique. Il y a les habitations, il y a les autres constructions pour les bêtes. Passons maintenant à notre savoir-faire qui rentre dans la catégorie des TEC, Traditional Ecological Knowledge. Là, je vais donner deux exemples. L'exemple de la gestion des ressources en eau et en terre. Et les habitants du Jbel Ouslet, à travers leurs histoires, donc, ils étaient confrontés à un problème majeur qui est la rareté de l'eau dans cette montagne. Donc, sur le plan géologique, cette montagne donc, est privée pratiquement de sources, vu son substrat géologique. Donc, elle était pratiquement privée de sources. Et de point de vue climat, donc, le Jbel Ouslet fait partie de la frange des montagnes, donc située sur la frange saharienne entre la Méditerranée et le Sahara. c'est un climat semi-aride. Les précipitations ne dépassent pas les 450 mm par an. Donc, pour faire face à cette rareté de l'eau, il fallait trouver des solutions. Et les Oceltiers, c'est-à-dire les habitants de cette montagne, ils ont donc développé un savoir-faire ancestral très intéressant. Malheureusement, en grande partie, il a disparu maintenant, mais donc, la première solution, c'est d'abord, il faut trouver une solution pour stocker l'eau et pour collecter les eaux de pluie. Pour cela, les habitants du Jbel Ouslet, ils ont construit des installations hydrauliques de plusieurs types. Les plus anciennes installations sont des bassins taillés dans le roc. Typologiquement, ce sont les plus anciens. Donc, la collecte de l'eau se faisait, comme vous le voyez, par l'aménagement de rainures qui collectent les eaux de pluie. Et après, il y a plusieurs bassins. Un premier bassin de décantation, un deuxième bassin, puis la grande citerne. Ici, quelques exemples de bassins. Donc, ces bassins sont couverts par des dalles calcaires. Vous pouvez regarder sur cette diapo qu'il y a des trous de puisage. Ici, un croquis qui montre donc la profondeur qui peut atteindre donc les 2 mètres, même plus. D'autres bassins qui exploitent donc des fissures naturelles qui sont par la suite élargies. D'autres types de citernes qui remontent probablement à l'époque médiévale, ce sont les citernes fissurales. Ces citernes donc exploitent des fissures élargies. En profondeur, ces fissures sont nettoyées et leur altérité élargie par la taille. Et les extrémités des parois montrent généralement un enduit d'étanchéité. Un autre type de citerne, ce sont des citernes construites contre escarpement. Et vraiment, la montagne compte des centaines et des centaines de ce type de citernes. Donc, imaginez pour collecter de l'eau pour une population qui dépasse les 30 000 personnes, l'effort entrepris par des générations et des générations dans la construction de ces installations. Là, je vais montrer seulement quelques exemples. Et ici, cette citerne, exceptionnellement, a été aménagée aux dépens d'un abri qui contenait des peintures. Et ces peintures, si vous voulez, je retourne après sur la diapo, représentaient les plus anciennes représentations de planimétrie agraire en Tunisie et même en Afrique du Nord. Donc sur la diapo en bas, vous regardez donc l'enduit d'étanchéité qui utilise de la céramique romaine concassée. Donc ici, ça peut aider pour établir une chronologie relative. D'autres types de citernes. Donc vous voyez la conduite qui conduit l'eau et après le dallage de la couverture. La diapo en bas à gauche. Arrivons maintenant à d'autres installations hydrauliques. Celles-ci sont plus récentes. Elles dateraient de l'époque moderne. Donc vous voyez la grandeur et les matériaux de construction. c'est clair que c'est l'œuvre d'un pouvoir central. Donc à un certain moment, le massif a abrité, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, l'un des prétendants au pouvoir, un bey, le cousin du bey de Tunis, donc a pris fuite et a installé donc son autorité dans cette montagne. Et là, nous avons de grandes constructions de citernes et de barrages. Donc ce barrage est sous forme d'un mur complexe de 42 mètres de long qui barre un vallon étroit et rocailleux. Passons maintenant à notre savoir-faire développé par l'Eusseltia, c'est l'aménagement des terrasses en culture. Donc ces terrasses jouaient un double rôle, le maintien de la terre arable et le maintien aussi des eaux de ruissellement. Et les sources historiques racontent que ces habitants allaient même chercher de la terre fertile de la plaine voisine à dos de mulet et remplissaient les terrasses pour leur culture. Ils étaient surtout des arboriculteurs. Ils cultivaient l'olivier, la vigne, le caroubier, le pommier et plein d'arbres fruitiers. Et toute la montagne presque, elle est aménagée en terrasses de culture. Donc ces aménagements sont très anciens et luttent très efficacement contre l'érosion, tout en permettant un apport supplémentaire en eau nécessaire pour une meilleure production des plantations. Sont de plusieurs types ces terrasses et toute la montagne pratiquement elle est aménagée par des terrasses. Bon, quelques terrasses ont été réaménagées ou plutôt restaurées par des chantiers qui dépendent du ministère de la Culture dans l'objectif de lutter surtout contre l'érosion, mais la plupart des terrasses sont en ruine et sont délaissées. Outre donc l'arboriculture, ces petites terrasses offraient un petit espace, même exigu, pour la culture du blé et de l'orge. Quelques détails de ces terrasses. Vous voyez les murettes de pierre sèche qui peuvent être hautes de quelques décimètres et aller jusqu'à 1 et 2 mètres. Un autre type de structure qui a été aménagée par les anciens habitants de cette montagne, ce sont ces chemins donc protégés par des murs en pierre sèche. En fait, les habitants de cette montagne étaient aussi des pasteurs, donc ils faisaient la transhumance et pour protéger leur culture des troupeaux, ils ont aménagé ces sortes de chemins sur pratiquement toute la montagne et ces chemins mènent directement vers la plaine. Donc c'est un autre type de savoir-faire ancestral. Ces chemins sont des vrais chemins déjà balisés de randonnée. Ça, c'est très intéressant à exploiter dans des circuits de tourisme culturel. Et personnellement, j'ai trouvé les traces de ces aménagements même sur des peintures. Voilà. Donc, le dépeuplement, l'abandon de la montagne, la migration et la perte de ce savoir-faire écologique traditionnel a entraîné bien entendu l'accélération de la dégradation de l'environnement. Donc, il est très important de penser à adopter des stratégies intégrées durables, surtout intégrer les objectifs environnementaux, culturels, socio-économiques du développement, dans des actions donc surtout en matière de tourisme culturel. Oui, j'ai presque fini. Donc, pour résumer, je veux dire que tout ce patrimoine matériel et immatériel donc, représente un énorme potentiel, surtout à exploiter en matière de tourisme culturel. Et il est donc fort souhaitable de penser à des projets, à des actions qui vraiment combinent les données naturelles et archéologiques dans le cadre de projets de développement durable qui font profiter surtout la population locale. Et ceci peut avoir plusieurs retombées économiques, sociales et surtout patrimoniales. Et merci beaucoup.
Bom dia, Edson. Milani, você está aí? Ok.
Bom dia, Luiz.
Então eu vou... Você vai apresentar um PowerPoint?
PowerPoint.
Então eu vou só dar aqui... É automático. Esqueço-me disso.
Libere para minha compartilhamento, né?
É isso mesmo. O Rui Pena vai fazer a sua apresentação.
Como é que eu faço aqui?
Tu fazes
Nada.
a apresentação dele? Não tens de fazer nada, estás
não.
aqui.
Ok.
Estás aqui. Depois quando ele começar eu faço o compartilhamento. Ele faz a compra.
Olá, desapareceu.
Não, sim, podes falar.
Olá, Milani, boa tarde. Fala em inglês ou em
Como
português?
está, Rui? Tudo bem?
Tudo jóia.
Olha,
Em português ou em inglês?
desculpa que há aqui um problema qualquer na projeção. Tenho que ver o que é que se passa. Só um segundo.
Já estão vendo aí?
Não, estamos eles na tela sim, mas há qualquer coisa que não está a funcionar porque está ainda aquele. Espera aí. Sim, mas tem que saber.
Se quiserem, eu apresento outra vez o meu.
Este é.
Não, este é o anterior.
Queres ver que eu fiz sair o Milani? Milani, você está aí?
Não, desapareceu.
Milani?
É este.
Pronto, tive medo de ter mandado. Agora já está. Agora, como é que é isto?
Aqui aparece.
Não, agora está tudo bem. Agora já pode o Rui Pena falar e depois você coloca isso na tela cheia e fica.
Ok. Então, fala em inglês ou em português? Ou... Bom, mas eu falo em português e depois a apresentação em inglês. Não? Milani, boa tarde. Alô? Está aí você?
Sim, tranquilo.
Ok. Boa tarde, da parte daqui da organização do evento de Geosciências. É um prazer, it's a pleasure host your presence here. And I will say a few words about you, as far as I can, to the audience here. Edson Milani is a Brazilian citizen that is in this very moment in Brazil. I don't know exactly where, but somewhere in Brazil. And Milani is a geologist, and he worked for a very long time in oil exploration inside Petrobras, which, as you know, was and is a big one in the international industry. And Milani was, I had the pleasure to meet Milani in Portugal during those good old days in Actions of Cooperation. In particular, I remember a meeting with Galp and geoscientists in Portugal, very long time ago already. And Milani was a friend of our team during the 90s and the first 15 years of this century. Our team that was doing exploration and discussion on exploration in Portugal in particular. And Milani is also, now I think, as far as I can, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he is retired from Petrobras, and now he works on geological survey. Am I right, Milani?
Perfect. That's it.
Geological survey in, I think, in sedimentary basins.
Exactly.
Brazil, worldwide.
Worldwide, yes.
It's necessary to say that in Brazil you have tens and tens of sedimentary basins. So there is a lot of work to do. And Brazil had the lucidity to do not transform the country in a Disneyland as we did in Portugal. So in Brazil they continued to make exploration and production of energy, fossil energy, and I hope that that will continue for a long time. And today Milani is going to tell us something about unconventional hydrocarbons. You probably, most of you or many of you are not familiar with unconventional hydrocarbons, but allow me to synthesize. Unconventional hydrocarbons are those hydrocarbons that exist in the rock, and in the rock there is coincidence between source rock, reservoir. So these unconventional hydrocarbons are a special situation that I'm sure Milani can explain better than me. So Milani will talk something about unconventional hydrocarbons on the global demand for energy. We hopefully in Europe we are free of hydrocarbon energy. We don't use hydrocarbon energy anymore, if I am right. And but in many places of the world, worldwide, in Americas, in Asia, everywhere, hydrocarbons are still very and will still be very important in the next decades. But better than me, I will ask Milani to talk us something about this. Milani, it is your time.
Okay, Rui, thank you very much. Thank you also on the invitation to be virtually with you in this meeting today. Thank you. I'm honored. I'm here in the cold southernmost Brazil now, and happy to be with you in this moment. I will close my camera to provide a better streaming for the presentation, okay?
Okay.
Hopefully. It's not that simple. Let's proceed like this. Raw materials and sustainability are central issues for the coming decades, for sure. They have the power to define in which kind of world we will continue to live, if any. But also energy is a key issue for mankind. And this is the matter I'm bringing today aiming to promote a comprehensive discussion among the participants. If we look around, every object we see was initially a raw material that underwent a transformation process in order to reach its final shape and function. Energy was used for that, and energy is continuously flowing for the appliances. Illumination, temperature control, and so on.
Milani, let me interrupt you just 1 second.
Yes.
Can you eventually improve your microphone in order to listen better here? Because we...
Is at the maximum now.
Okay. Are you changing your slides, or it is the... You are still on the same, the first one? Because we don't see... Sorry?
Em português.
Você já está mudando os slides ou ainda está no primeiro slide? Porque nós aqui já...
Estou no segundo agora, já mudei.
Não, aqui não está.
Tem que passar...
Mas aqui está passando perfeito.
Aqui não, aqui não.
mas ele tem que pôr em modo de tela cheia.
Aqui está funcionando perfeitamente, Rui.
Você tem que pôr, segundo dizem aqui, em modo de tela cheia e mudar.
Já está em modo
Já
de
está?
apresentação.
Então aqui não muda, provavelmente é por estar no hemisfério sul.
Pode ser.
Um momento, Milani, um momento, temos aqui um problema técnico.
Posso parar o compartilhamento e tentar novamente.
Ainda está esta treta.
Temos aqui um pequeno probleminha. Logo vamos resolver.
Ok.
Deixa-me sentar, deixa-me descolar. Só para ver que sofremos todos do mesmo mal a partir do momento em que começamos a entrar na época da fossilização. Que eu não consegui ver.
Fala por ti.
Depois do almoço é normal.
Eu vou interromper o seu compartilhamento, Milani, e vou-te pedir para fazer de novo o compartilhamento. Ok?
Certo, ok.
Vou-te fazer assim.
O verdadeiro adesivo.
Ele não está a conseguir.
Não?
Não sei.
Está pelo Zoom, não.
Está, mas ele há bocado partilhou, agora não está conseguindo. Você não está conseguindo, Milani?
Não, vou entrar novamente no link. Só um momento.
Está bem. Houve qualquer coisa. O Zoom não está a funcionar bem hoje.
Não?
Mas não é o nosso, é a FCCN.
Devem ser os russos.
Deve ser os russos. Ou o Pierluigi, o que é que vocês não querem? Pierluigi.
É a máfia, ou são os russos ou é a máfia. Mas talvez o Pierluigi tenha achado.
Ok.
Agora estamos te ouvindo, ainda não estamos vendo, mas isso deve demorar um pouquinho. Já estamos vendo.
Posso compartilhar?
Por favor, vou só dar outra vez o... Ok, já pode. Já estamos vendo. Agora pode pôr em tela cheia.
Já está.
Que estranho.
Modo de apresentação.
Em modo de apresentação.
Sim. Está passando os slides ou não?
Não.
Não.
Poxa, aqui funciona perfeitamente.
Mas que coisa tão estranha, pá. Oh, Milani, experimente clicar 2 vezes no primeiro slide.
Já cliquei.
Agora clique no segundo. Bom, agora estamos a ver o segundo. Vai ter que fazer isso para todos eles.
Vai ter que fazer manualmente.
Se não, é porque nós aqui não estamos nós aqui estamos a ver a sua barra lateral. Se puser em tela cheia, não deveríamos ver a barra lateral, deveríamos ver só os slides.
Agora está com... aqui tem uma opção Remote Control. Você controlaria daí a apresentação?
Oh, mas isso era preciso que eu tivesse essa tecnologia. Eu acho que é melhor, Milani, se não se importar, ir clicando slide a slide, que isso funciona. Está bem?
Ok, ok.
Estamos agora a ver o
Aqui
primeiro. Estamos
Esse é
vendo...
o primeiro.
Sim, tem que clicar no segundo e assim sucessivamente.
Certo, então vamos. Ok. Só vamos perder os efeitos visuais, mas tudo bem. Nada é perfeito. Vamos lá.
Ok?
As I was saying,
Já estamos no segundo, sim.
if we look around, every object we see was initially a raw material that underwent a transformation process in order to reach its final shape and function. Energy was used for that, and energy is continuously flowing for the appliances, illumination, temperature control, and so on. Energy is everywhere. Human society and organizations are frequently described as structured by 3 supporting pillars, the ESG factors. I dare to include energy as the foundation of this framework. In fact, the history of humanity is strictly connected to controlling and using energy. Since the Paleolithic period, when the quest for fire was successful, we have burned wood for millennia as our single mode of energy. Mineral coal appeared in the beginning of the 18th century. By the middle of the 19th century, petroleum was discovered, followed few decades later by electricity. Notice that none of them was abandoned with the appearance of a new choice. There were no conclusive transitions between them. In reality, they have been added one after the other in order to supply the growing needs of our society, as we will see in the coming slides. Human society is absolutely unequal, wasting and scarcity of energy together. Individual transportation using V8 engines in one side, in a hard contrast with some people that have nothing and remain burning wood. This is not ethical in a sense. Doutoressa Silvia treated brilliantly this fundamental topic this morning, and I fully agree with her arguments and propositions. I will continue on the energy presentation, and hopefully we will be able to put these things together during the subsequent discussion moment. This picture shows the last 50 years of world's petroleum consumption, a trend of continuous growth, following, of course, the growth of population, cities, and to fulfill the level of comfort demanded by our contemporaneous civilization. In this period, there were two moments of break in this long-term tendency. A crisis of supply from 1979 to 85, and the dramatic reduction of use of energy during the pandemic year of 2020. The global consumption of energy today is shown here by source. 84% is coming from fossil fuels. Coal and oil fighting for the first position. And here, electricity production by source. More than 2/3 of that are generated by fossil fuels. Renewable energy has grown fastly in the last two decades, mostly by the worldwide adoption of solar and wind solutions. And it already accounts for 10% of global demands. Renewable energy sources are growing, but not as fast as desired. Mr. Daniel Yergin, the great expert on petroleum issues, stated that clean energy transition will be complicated in his article dated 2021. And we can add that it will certainly take longer than expected. A glimpse on global logistics. Middle East and the former Soviet Union, in your left side, are as the great exporters. Europe and Asia Pacific as major importer regions. The same information now in a map. This is a highly dynamic picture because energy trade is sensitive to geopolitical circumstances. Let's remember recent events related to Ukraine's invasion and the embargo of Russia exports. But reserves of petroleum continue to increase worldwide. But notice that from 2010 to 2020, the last decade, the growth occurred at a smaller rate than in the previous decade. Some experts assign this reduction from 26% to 6% reduction of exploratory efforts as the expected behavior of E&P companies in response to society's rising aversion to fossil fuels. In a long-term perspective, and considering that petroleum will continue to be used, prices will inevitably rise. Reserves to production ratios shown by region. This means the years keeping today's production that any region has petroleum to its proper consumption. The mean global ratio corresponds to a volume enough to sustain the current level of production for more 50 years. 3 countries hold 45% of today's known reserves: Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, plus Canada. And of that, 28% are unconventional hydrocarbons. Firstly, let's remember how conventional hydrocarbons works. It's all a question of drilling a well upon a subsurface trap predicted by geological concepts, based on geophysical data. If everything occurred as desired, considering the generation, migration, accumulation processes, oil and or gas will be discovered and flow to the surface, sometimes spontaneously, sometimes through pumping. This is the relatively less expensive way to find and produce petroleum. As an example of that, I show here a seismic line of the pre-salt province in southeastern offshore Brazil. Those wells are highly productive ones, with up to 50,000 barrels of oil per day, a condition that enables exploration and production 300 kilometers away from the shoreline, and at depths that can reach up to 7 kilometers to the reservoirs. But situation exists of hydrocarbons accumulations where the usual procedures of oil industry does not work. This implies higher costs and technological innovation to get them. This is the unconventional hydrocarbons world. And let's briefly see some examples. Oil sands. They are poorly consolidated sandstones deposits saturated with ultra-heavy, highly viscous oil. The huge Canadian oil sands in Alberta province resulted from the upward migration of hydrocarbon generated in the Devonian sequence and accumulated widely in the Aptian sequence. The oil sands are mined and transported to a process plant where it's washed with hot water, thus segregating the hydrocarbon from the mineral matrix of the rock. But even larger than the Canadian oil sands is the Venezuelan Orinoco oil belt in northern South America, with more than 1 trillion barrels of oil in place. Remember, Venezuela plus Canada hold circa 30% of the total reserves of petroleum known today, mostly unconventional. But there is nothing more unconventional than gas hydrates, the burning ice. In a simplistic description, it is ice with associated gas molecules. Stability zones for gas hydrates are found at low temperatures, for sure, in circumpolar regions, high latitudes areas, and at the foot of continental slope in deep waters of oceans all around the world. Gas hydrates are widely distributed and have been sampled by research projects in some places. Japan is the country leading this issue. They have also already tested the flow capacity of one gas hydrate equivalence. What is important is that gas hydrates are by far the largest resource of natural gas in our planet. with estimates of circa 43,000 trillions of cubic feet. Coal bed methane is another modality of unconventional hydrocarbons. Within coal deposits, there are variable amounts of associated gas. This gas was formed together during qualification. That is the transformation process of peat into coal. Methane is trapped by water pressure in microfractures of coal layers and can be produced by the simple reduction of pressure, pumping water away from the coal. Any coal basin worldwide has the potential to produce methane. To finish, let's see something on the impressive phenomenon of shale gas oil. In this case, hydrocarbon is produced directly from the impermeable source rock through artificial fracturing. In the last decades, this technology was a real game changer, making the United States of America the #1 in the ranking of both oil and gas production. As we can see here, gas production, as well oil production, the ranking of countries. Some factors favor the shale and gas and oil production in the United States. And among them, we can list the high degree of knowledge of their sedimentary provinces, mature exploration level of most basins, with declining production, leading to more radical procedures. Gas transportation infrastructure already available. They have a purchaser market for gas. The availability of drilling and fracturing services, and of course the unitary cost of operation, as here in the United States, is the cheapest worldwide. Marcellus Shale is a good example of how this thing works. This is a shale that occurs, this is a Devonian shale that occurs in the Appalachian foreland in eastern North America. Considering the thermal maturity map that is shown here of this Marcellus shale level, if we drill a well in the pink area, that is the gas-prone region, we will get gas production. If we drill a well in the green oil-prone area, we will get oil production. In any case, fracturing will be needed to create permeability and allow the hydrocarbon to flow. There is a vast potential worldwide for shale gas and oil projects. In Argentina, for example, shale projects are becoming very important for countries growing oil and gas production in recent years. The last 50 years of gas consumption worldwide shows a vigorous growth profile, aiming more gas with the pass of time. If we are required to use fossil fuels by demand to supply reasons, let's choose gas. It is the least damaging among the fossil fuels in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. To conclude, let's remember, it's a pity that I can't show this picture step by step, but what I try to show here is that we have burned wood for a long time. In the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution was strongly supported by coal. 20th century was the petroleum age. And in present time, getting electricity from gas plant, as this one that is showed here, seems a reasonable way to plan a viable transition towards a cleaner world. Thank you so much.
Milani,
Sim?
are you listening? Okay.
Deu para acompanhar tudo?
Sim. Thank you very much for your very clear presentation. And is there any question in the audience about the presentation? No? Yes?
Thank you very much for the two keynote speakers. Can you hear, Milani? Você consegue ouvir? Não.
Não,
Muito baixinho.
Eu vou
muito baixo.
tem que
falar
ser
aqui.
aqui.
Eu falo daqui, eu falo. Aqui já se ouve. I think we have two interesting approaches precisely to the issue of using raw materials. And one thing, of course, that we understand that occurred through history is not that
Não
much.
está ouvindo, não está ouvindo?
Não.
Talvez.
Não, acho que tenho que falar aqui.
Ah.
It's not that. Não, agora você percebe, não é? Agora você ouve. Está ouvindo, Milani?
Estou, mas o outro microfone talvez.
Agora.
E este, é bom?
Perfeito.
Ah, que maravilha. Mas este é porque é o Rui Pena que está a segurar.
Exatamente.
I was saying that what we may understand eventually is that the issue of human adaptation is not so much the diversification of different sources of raw materials, energy or whatever, but the logistics involved with it. And of course, the moment you expand the logistic possibilities, there is also an economic factor that is related to the access of some specific sources which are less available everywhere. And my question, because again we are here discussing precisely the issue of raw materials and logistics in this panel. I see two important challenges that in our society are not clearly discussed, but I think maybe we could contribute on that. First is we are experiencing a so-called energetic transition, but it's very clear from your presentation, Milani, that whichever transition this will be, it will take a large number of years. We can also see with the impact of the invasion of Ukraine how fast adaptations will occur and how some elements are not disclosed publicly. For example, everyone talks about gas and about changing the imports of gas from Russia by imports of gas from Algeria, for example, and from the United States. But no one is talking about coal. And coal, which has been banned in the European Union for a long time, is 20% of the energy in Germany. And it's still being imported. And it will be kept being imported because for some reason no one is talking about it. And the question is, in a world like this, where globalization is challenged, where frontiers and walls of all sorts are being dressed again, how can we think of a more sustainable use of energy sources that can, on one hand, moderate environmental, I would not say climatic, but environmental impacts, and on the other hand, moderate also social impacts? Because what we see very clearly with the energetic transition as well is that the faster it goes, the worse it is for low-income people. Not for the middle and upper social strata, but for the low income, there is a severe impact. What would be the answer for that? I think this is an important issue. And my question goes also in the direction of Jafar in this. Of course, no one wants, and even those who think they want, they don't understand that it's not possible to go back to the past. Having said this, there are many strategies in terms of local sustainable solutions. For example, wells and water storage that could be implemented. How do you see this could become part of a responsible agenda in our society in a way that is not only literature? Okay, thank you.
I would remind that the worst mode of energy is no energy. Huh?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have one question to put. Milan, do you listen to me, Milani?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay, one question is the following. As you know very well, in Europe, mostly in Europe, but in some other places also, there are a lot of prejudices concerning unconventional hydrocarbons, in particular the so-called shale gas and oil gas, as you mentioned before. And the issues that people in Europe are sometimes very hysteric is about the risks associated with production, in particular seismic risk and so. I would like you to make a comment on these risks, the level of risks, and what is your concept on that?
Yes, Roy. Thank you on the question. I'm reading about that a lot. The degree of drilling in the United States is absurd. And there are very few wells with microseismic response. Okay? Don't forget, we cannot forget, this is an engineering project. Drilling a well is an engineering project as well as build a building. As construct a building and drill a well is the same process. We have a project and an execution. If project and execution is well done, zero problems. Okay? There is a demonization of these unconventional hydrocarbons. But what we can do? Come back to the caves? We cannot do this. We have to deal with the consequences of burning fossil fuels, maybe with better filters and so, up to when we can reach a complete solar and wind energy. But we to think about a century forward. So let's plan this transition. Don't do alarmism. Let's plan the transition. We are not doing this. That's my opinion.
Thank you. I would like also to make a comment, and you eventually, you are a very experienced person on this issue, but my comment is the following. In the Portuguese margin, in particular, that's what I know much better, in the Portuguese margins, both onshore and offshore, we have been studying through seismic and through imagery, satellite imagery and other tools, that we can say that there is a lot of leaking, a lot of natural leaking, both onshore and offshore, which is usually unknown by most people. People are not aware of the huge amount of leaking in offshore and onshore, in particular in Portuguese margin. I saw in statistics, in international statistics worldwide, that the leaking, the natural leaking of oil and gas, the natural, without human intervention, the natural leaking of oil and gas is around 50% of oil, all the oil and the gas present in the oceans, and the rest of 50%, 40% is from ships, tankers, and only around between 5 and 10% is related with oil and gas exploration. Can you comment something on this issue?
Yes, Roy, for sure. If you don't have a effective seal bed, or if you have a tectonic phase relatively recent, you will have leakage in your basin. Oil industry is one of the safest industry in the world. If you regard the amount of activity versus the problems we live, of course, when we have a problem, normally is something terrible, like the Gulf Coast leakage some years ago. But if we regard the amount of activity, the problems that we experience are minimal.
Yeah.
So you are right. Most of the leakage in the oceans is natural.
Yeah.
And ships are a dirty mode of transportation.
Yeah.
Normally they clean, they deposits in the middle of the ocean. It's a problem, really a problem. But you are right. Your phrase was perfect. The most of the leakage is natural.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else want to put any question from the audience. Gustavo. Gustavo is a Brazilian student here. He is from the INP.
Hi, Professor Milani.
Gustavo, como vai, rapaz?
Your master student at UERJ. I'm here with Professor Rui Pena doing my PhD.
Prazer em revê-lo.
Professor, in a world after a pandemic, after with a war in course in Ukraine, European Union is talking about stop using vehicles with normal gasoline and gas oil and in 20 years. how will be a world in the next 20 years now? Maybe with three power countries shared by US, China, and another global, very strong global consumers like India. How will be this world in 20 years in terms of energy, with oil and another energy supplies?
Both. See.
20 years scenario.
This is the million-dollar question, huh?
Yeah.
Because what we will see in the next, if I was here a year before now, I will say something. Today I am saying something different. This war, this invasion, not a war, was completely unexpected one. The consequences, we are not feeling the consequences up now. They will come.
We are feeling.
All this global arrangement of exports, imports should be modified after this conflict. And so I think that Middle East will play again a key role, because Saudi Arabia, for example, they have 20% of oil known reserves in the world, and they have the policy to sell slowly their reserves. Hopefully, they will change this and sell more petroleum for those that demand. Europe, for example, you are in a critical situation in terms of supply for your market. Huh? I think that there is a large amount of people that is worried in Europe, because it's critical, the situation. If you cut Russia, what happens in a short term, in the middle of a winter, for example? So in 20 years, we will have probably the optimization of production of coal, petroleum, and hopefully more gas in the matrix worldwide. With that, we are lowering the influence of CO2 that fossil fuels produce. But we still will going on in the same coal, petroleum, gas, and renewables, going on and on, but always in the last position, up to 20 years.
Yeah. Thank you. Any more questions? It seems that everyone is depressed with your comments, because we are in Europe, and you probably you are probably not aware that the situation is worse than you said. And
North America? Why?
No, I mean in Europe. In Europe. In Europe, yes. The situation is very, very bad, and it tends to worst. So people are very concerned, and it is not just individual people, but also countries and governments. And so exactly. We will see what will happen in the next.
Probably Europe will have to act as a whole, all together.
Even
more strength.
Even all together, I'm not sure that it will be a solution, but we'll see in the future. We will be here to wait for the reality. Unless we can.
I tried. What I tried was talk real words.
I think
Try to express the reality as I saw.
yes,
okay?
yes. Maybe we have a place in Brazil to escape because the situation here will be much worse.
After October, please.
Deixa-me cumprimentar.
Okay.
Deixa-me cumprimentar.
Don't come now.
Olá.
Oi, Maria.
Oi, tudo bem?
Prazer muito grande em vê-la.
Igualmente. Eu agora vou lançar uma provocação. Okay? Now I'm just commenting in a provocative way. I think that oil companies have disregard communication. Unlike technological enterprises, companies, everybody see, and I include the media, everybody see positive things in technological advances, the 4G, the 5G, the 6G. Everybody sees or trusts the pharmaceutical companies. But nobody trusts the oil companies. What you have said, it's like flying in airplanes. It's the safest way of flying, of traveling. But when there is a crash, all the news start with the accident. With one accident, all the news talk about that air accident. With one accident in oil production, all the news, television starts with that. And as you have said, the success of the oil production, nobody talks about. And I think that the oil companies, for a long time, have disregarded the communication dimension of their work and to provide information to the public that the benefits are much better than the casual accidents. Hopefully, I think that in the next decades, the political agenda in Europe will change dramatically. I think that we will stop listening to Greta and the strikes of Greta and all that story of climate change, because European organizations will need energy. So I think that most of the public opinion has been driven by political agenda and communication media agendas. And now that we assume our dependence on energy, all that narrative will be changing. And I think it was a big mistake from the oil companies not to make a strong investment in communication, to show, like the pharmacy companies, that benefits are much greater than the casual accidents. I think it's just a reflection. Gostei muito de o rever.
Comentário.
Yeah.
Último comentário. A person that buys a modern electric car is really worried on where comes the energy it uses?
No.
Or is just a new toy that he is buying?
Exactly. Because the energy comes from the...
This is a nonsense, a complete
Absolutely.
nonsense, energetic nonsense.
Absolutely.
Okay, Milani, in the name of the organization,
You can go and drink a mat.
we want to thank you very much for your collaboration and presentation, your comments. I think it was a very, very clear, and all of us have been improved our knowledge on this issue that you have presented. Thank you very much.
E venha visitar-nos.
E pode vir aqui.
Sim.
Pode voltar a Portugal.
Vou finalizar no nosso velho bom português.
Exatamente.
Foi muito bom revê-los hoje. oportunidade de conversar sobre um assunto que é meu tema atual. Eu estou estudando esses não convencionais e foi muito legal, foi muito bom. Espero que seja útil para vocês essas elucubrações que eu fiz aqui com vocês. Tá?
Foi muito
e
claro.
Vamos manter um contato que
Claro.
sempre foi muito,
Claro.
muito educado, muito interessante.
Abraço.
Muito obrigado aí pela
Muito
oportunidade.
obrigado,
Obrigada,
Milani.
obrigada.
Abraço para você. Eu não sei, não sei como é que se desliga isto, ó Luís.
Eu não sei se há questões relativamente ao colega da Tunísia. Any questions regarding? I would like to. I have already tried to understand because I have missed the geology.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Is there any relation between the kind of rocks, because they look similar, but they are not at all? You have marley levels alternation, and compact limestones. Is there any relation between the kind of construction and the kind of substrate?
Yes. La relation existe entre
Entre le type de
géologique du calcaire
et le type de construction.
type de construction. Quand on a alternance
De marne
des marnes
et calcaire.
et calcaires, donc l'habitat est inclus dans les strates
Marne.
marneuses.
Uh-huh.
Quand le substrat donc compact, l'habitat est
Sur.
le calcaire.
Et même les endroits où il y a des marnes, en bas, je pense que ça peut être jurassique. Je ne sais pas. C'est plus imperméable. Et pourquoi les tanks sont en dessus, dans les calcaires plus massifs?
À ma connaissance, c'est du calcaire crétacé.
D'accord, merci. C'est très joli. Tunisie, je connais bien, c'est très joli. Je ne connais pas cette région, je n'ai pas compris où se trouve. C'est le centre-ouest. Centre.
Plutôt centre-est.
Est.
C'est à 60 km de la mer.
Ah,
C'est plutôt
en face de quel est
en
le
face de
Sousse?
Sousse. Face de Sousse.
Oui, j'ai fait depuis le sud vers le nord.
Oui. Mais c'est un passage obligé du nord au sud. Vous ne pouvez pas passer du nord au sud sans passer par Kéro.
Ah.
C'est un nœud.
Je recommande Sidi Bou Saïd.
Ah oui,
Et le musée de Bardo.
En fait, la montagne, ça veut dire quoi, le nom de la montagne?
Gibert.
Slat, c'est le nom d'une fraction tribale, parce que cela ça existe au Maroc, Slaten, et ça existe en Algérie, Slat, et ça existe en Tunisie, Slat. Et ce mouvement de population est attesté depuis la préhistoire, parce qu'on a les évidences de la rupestre qui confirment cette mobilité montagne depuis l'est marocain jusqu'à l'ouest, c'est-à-dire le centre de la Tunisie.
Donc c'est des berbères, non?
C'est des berbères, oui, ce sont des fractions des tribus berbères. Et l'emploi du berbère a persisté Jbel Ouslat jusqu'à l'époque moderne. Donc j'ai trouvé des inscriptions arabes et berbères. Donc sur la même roche, on a les inscriptions, l'écriture arabe et les caractères libyco-berbères.
J'ai été à Hammamet,
Hammamet.
mais j'ai voyagé jusqu'à Tunis.
C'est un voyage organisé.
Ah,
Oui, parce qu'à Hammamet, c'est des Boussaïd, c'est les clichés touristiques.
et le
C'est pas
Bardo.
l'intérieur du pays.
Non. Non, mais j'étais là où il y a le lac de sel, du sel.
Oui. Je vais présenter pour les étudiants du master mes recherches
aux alentours de ce lac asséché, c'est le Châtel-Géry.
Ouais,
C'est
ça,
un
c'est
paléolac
impressionnant.
Pléistocène. Oui, c'est un paléolac Pléistocène. Et on a identifié des dizaines, même des centaines de sites préhistoriques, donc Holocène et Pléistocène.
Et j'étais jusqu'à la frontière avec Algérie, où il y a un oasis.
Oui, l'oasis de...
Je me souviens pas
C'est
les
un
noms.
peu loin de la frontière, c'est Sadrilène, non?
Peut-être, je me souviens pas les noms.
L'oasis avec l'eau chaude.
Je me souviens. Et un autre endroit où il y avait un colisée romain très
C'est
bien
El
préservé.
Gem. C'est le deuxième colisée dans le monde romain. C'est le
Très
Gem,
bien.
c'est Rome.
C'était parfait. J'ai beaucoup aimé la Tunisie. Très joli, je recommande. Et le musée du Bardo, exceptionnel. Bon, on finit. Tinha que ser.
No, don't worry, I have to leave, so
Sharp.
I will not take long, but I think this is important. And I think this relates, this debate, with the morning debate. Because sometimes we intervene in a highly political sphere. We are not the politicians, stricto sensu, but this is a highly politicized topic. And it is run by sound bites, so we have to be very attentive. Because one thing is when we discuss among ourselves, another thing was when we discuss with non-scientists, with other people that sees the world, everything in black and white. And if you don't play for the naive discourse of the sustainability of Elon Musk and other people like him, is clustered immediately as a negationist. And it's clear that we are not negationists. It's exactly the opposite. I'm saying it's not slightly different, it's exactly the opposite. Those who are negationists of science are those who present the absolute truth found through the lenses of a microscope, which, by the way, they didn't find. What we say, and I think we have to make it clear in the conclusions of this conference, because I think this conference, when we planned it, we thought we will have discussions, not a lot of papers, we will have debates, we will have prestigious keynote speakers to animate the discussion, and then there will be a short set of observations that we will convey. I have asked the mayor of Mação, who is also vice president of the region, to accept this document in the end, and this will be conveyed also to national authorities. So this is the way it will be done. It will be conveyed to UNESCO, it will be conveyed to the Portuguese authorities, to FCT, and so on. One important aspect is that everyone is now discussing about climate change. And we call this today the climate agenda. We even have a SDG on climate. If we think a little bit about our experience 2.5 decades ago, and for those who are younger, if you do some research in the library, you will see that very few people would talk about climate then. We were talking about environment. And it's completely different discussion. The debate on climate and environment, the two, have been proposed since 1972 in Stockholm. The idea of the climate agenda was there from the very beginning, and it was proposed primarily by the United States and by big corporations. As we know, the trend was focused on environment, even with a naive understanding of the environment. In the beginning, it was only the green, then slowly it encompassed the human activity. One major outcome of the ECO 92 summit, which for me had many mistakes, but one major outcome was the so-called Agenda 21. What was the idea of the Agenda 21? was the idea of mobilization of people. What Silvia Pepolone mentioned this morning, what the Zoros mentioned this morning about geoparks. Having people acting in a positive way to build something new. The climate agenda, which builds on the failure of the objectives of ECO 92 and the process of Kyoto and so on, the climate agenda started to grow in the end of the 1990s, and then it became dominant in the end of the first decade of this millennium, only then. And then today, we don't talk about the environment any longer. What is the big difference? When people are called to act on the environment, they were called to design and to co-construct a new sustainable way of living together in harmony and with the good quality of life. The climate agenda is completely different. A monster is presented to us, and all we can do is stop consuming. And to stop consuming what? What is condemned at a midterm, which is the dependence on this type of fossil energy. To start promoting faster new types of products for the market. But when we look behind, they are the same people. They are the same companies. And what we see, for example, very fast in the case of Europe, is that the discourse about renewable energies can shift very fast. For example, to say that nuclear energy is green. We can call it anything. We can be in favor of nuclear energy, of course. But no one in the 1990s would ever think that nuclear energy was the green energy. It was exactly the opposite. ECO 92 was against nuclear energy. So we understand that there is a political control of all the discussions, which affects all the elements. What Rui Penas mentioned this morning about what is good for the media is not good for the energy. What has been mentioned about the sources, for example, like what Milani was saying, the guy who is driving the 100,000 euros car of Elon Musk, does he care about where the energy is coming from? Does he care about what is the impact of slate gas, for example, in the United States? What is the relation between this and what is called sustainability? Science is about raising questions, of course bringing answers, but also raising doubts, criticism. I think we have to prepare very well our comments, because I think it is the time to strike. I say this honestly. I think what is going to happen in Europe in the next 3 or 4 years will be devastating in terms of quality of life of the middle classes. The drift for the movements of anti-science and far right will rise spectacularly. And this is the moment to talk. It's the moment to say the agenda of sustainability as it is presented is leading us to the chaos. And it is an anti-environment agenda. We have to refuse, in my view, the climatic agenda, because the climatic agenda doesn't allow to empower people. The climatic agenda says, trust on us, the science, but in fact behind the science is those who pay that science, as Rui Pena said. The oligarchs that control the game. Whereas the environment agenda, with all its limitations, and I think there were a lot of limitations, was actually calling for something we could do. Because we can't do anything when it comes to climate. And that was my comment. Now you can have a beer. Oh, okay. Artur.
Okay, Luis. Thank you for your thoughts. I agree in some aspects. However, I would like to share some different vision about your vision. In effect, if we went back to the foundation of UNESCO, during a long time during the discussion in 1945, initially the acronym will be UNESCO, without the S, and the S is science, and science at the service of the peace and development. So no more science at the service of the war. And in fact, during all these half of the 20th century and already 2 decades of 21st century, about more than 70 years, of the United Nations Agency for Education, Science and Culture, in effect, what we saw science, the scientific development in many, fortunately, much more situations at the service of the peace and the development, unfortunately, sometimes at the service of the war. And today we are living probably the most dark situation since these 72.
The oil crisis, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
3 years. So, of course, that, for example, the example that you give about the nuclear energy is a perfect case when the development of the scientific knowledge led us today in a situation when the use or the production of electric energy through nuclear power plants is more safe than 40 years nuclear no thanks time for years ago. However, we still looking in many cases for the fission nuclear power plants, and today we are already working in the fusion nuclear power plants, that if we achieve this could be the solution for many, many of our problems. And about the SDGs, and we can't look individually to each of the 17 SDGs. They are really and strongly interconnected. Some of them are eventually connected with all of them, especially the number 17, but particularly also the number 13, the climate or action for climate protection. It's very important when we talk about sustainable development to talk about the indicators that we need to achieve. And the 17 SDGs have 169 targets and 232 indicators. And these are really important because these are those that we need to account in the end to know how was the rate of achievement of any SDG. So it's always a kind of balance in between what is in favor of what? Of our existence. It's not like we hear many times in the news or we read in newspapers. It's about the planet is in danger. No, sorry. The planet has already 4.6 billion years, and for sure it's a half of time. What we are discussing now is the status quo of the good conditions for our existence as part of the present biodiversity. And this is really the question. Of course, it's not easy for many of our politicians, but we already saw good examples. I would like to remember François Hollande, that before the COP21 in Paris, he went to Iceland, and together with the Icelandic president, they went to the main or biggest glacier in Europe, and there they try to understand why it's so important to look to this increase of the changes, the climate changes, and the consequences that this increasing of the climate changes could have to us. We are the most complex machines in the present biodiversity. So a small change can cause us some, or put us in trouble, even for existence. So, and we have also in the geological record many lessons that this is why we are already changed even the uniformitarist paradigm. So it's not the present that is the key of the past, it's the past that is the key for the future. And looking to this, probably we will find a balance to discuss these questions. We have the science. Today we are producing science almost at the speed of light. Great research projects, great results. We are achieving results in the knowledge that 2 decades earlier we spent 10 times more. And of course, science will not solve all our problems. We can achieve some good results, but we need to, more than any other questions, we need to be aware about the problems, what we are discussing. And what we are discussing is how many times we, as species, will rest in the planet Earth. This could be really the main issue. And we know that we have the proxies, the planetary proxies, we have the trends, and we know that our action today are contributing to accelerate the problems. So what we can do to solve this? And many of these led to the natural disasters, like storms, like floods, like droughts.
Nothing of that is true. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All the data, you need to go to the data, not to the press.
Yeah, I'm going to read the data.
All the data that exists in the archives of data prove that the idea of increasing storms, natural disasters.
No, Rui, sorry. Let me finish. Let me finish in order. After you will understand my point of view, and you can debate this. No. The question it is. No. The question it is.
No, but I think possible. May I, because I think this is an important discussion, and I think.
But let me finish, please.
No, please do. Please finish.
Because I'm already finished.
Yeah.
The question it is that now we are aware about that floods exist and have consequences, droughts exist and have consequences. I'm not discussing about the if it's my carbon footprint or others that are influencing this. I'm discussing about the importance to be resilient to this. Now, we are already very aware, much more than ever, about the importance of this. It's our existence that is in the chess game. So, it's why it's so important, all the scientific work. It is important to discuss this, and much important of this, to have politicians duly prepared, duly assisted in order to contribute and to understand this. Meanwhile, we don't have this, we still with a big problem in our hands. And we can agree or disagree, but it's already a lapalisse true that we are accelerating our extinction.
Yes. I'm not convinced about the extinction, but I'm convinced about the possibility of canceling the... What I think is, I would say anything that is really in contradiction
No,
with the
no.
because you focus on the impacts of what is changing. I'm not sure if it's climatic change. I would rather consider it a normal oscillation in the lifetime of the Holocene. But whatever the situation is, the fact is people already understood that there is a change. And the question is then how we address this, what do we identify as causes, and what is the scope of our possibilities. And I think we can continue this discussion tomorrow morning, also today with a beer. But tomorrow morning we will talk of this in relation to the so-called circular economy, which is something that used to be very normal. The normal way of doing economy is a circular economy. And lots of people who talk about circular economy today are the same ones we have broken the circularity of economy. It is also important. All the computers we have at home, all the washing machines and so on that are programmed to stop working after a few years. And again, the blame is put on individuals, it's put on citizens, saying we did something that went beyond what we should do. But it's not us. We simply go and find the resources. If anyone in Mação today wants to wash its laundry in the common laundry space, you can look for it, you will not find it. That's all. That's all. So then you cannot blame people when you destroy all the possibilities of circularity. Beer is very circular. You drink and it goes out. And eventually it will go to the oceans, to the rivers and the oceans, and then it will be reused as water to produce new beer. So this is why it gets the color you normally see in the beer. Okay? Take care too. Now there is a visit to the museum. Who doesn't know where the museum is? Quem é que não sabe onde é o museu? Alright. So those who don't know, go with your hand.